Visions pertaining to what exactly the European Union should look like are clashing. Western nations, particularly France and Germany, are increasingly expressing disquiet over EU funds being siphoned off into nations that apparently refuse to respect core EU values. The French foreign minister stated abjectly that France was no longer willing to finance a populist Europe, his sights being set firmly on Poland and Hungary. The EU Budget Commissioner Günther Oettinger recently stated that the EU was in mortal danger thanks to those within and without. Indeed, within the Union, Oettinger made explicit reference to Hungary, Poland, Romania and Italy. Emmanuel Macron of France has suggested kicking nations out of the Schengen zone that do not respect a unified European effort to curb migration. These efforts include migrant quotas, but also the expansion of EU border agency Frontex. Macron firmly posited that Schengen nations that did not respect the joint European effort would become stripped of EU structural funds and be booted out of the zone. Of course, the majority of these statements are, if not directly, made for the ears of Viktor Orbán. Orbán, despite wanting increased border protection, has vowed not to take the EU up on their proposal for increased border security. Simply put, Orbán doesn't trust them, nor does he like the idea of giving up Hungarian sovereignty to a transnational organisation. On the issue of migrant quotas, he has sanctimoniously refused to budge. While this is going on, Orbán is lapping up EU funds. It is estimated that around 4% of Hungary's GDP is attributable to EU structural payouts, making Hungary the EU's largest financial recipient. Of course, the perception that Orbán is all too happy to receive money but simultaneously refuses to play ball has ruffled many feathers, culminating in the Article 7 spectacle we saw in Strasbourg. Article 7 was introduced in 1997 with the Treaty of Amsterdam. It was supposed to address the problem of Balkan states entering the EU with a less than rigid democratic tradition. If a state were to go against the core principles outlined in Article 2 of the European Treaty, then something was to be done, theoretically resulting in the suspension of voting rights for the member state in question. This is something that has never been done before until very recently. The first mumblings of such an action being taken against a state occurred in 2000, with the ascent of the Freedom Party to office in Austria, although the so-called nuclear option was then deemed too extreme. Only Poland, prior to Hungary, has been subjected to Article 7 proceedings. So then, what do the proceedings look like? Article 7 is split into 3 steps. The first step, 7.1, consists of a proposal being made to the Parliament outlining the supposed breaches of the accused country. This must then be supported by a 2/3 parliamentary majority. 4/5 of the Council then must agree that there is a clear risk of serious breach, after which the country in question will be monitored. If a breach is still seen to be taking place, another 2/3 parliamentary vote will take place, and if successful, the European Council must vote unanimously that a considerable and sustained breach is taking place. Only then can the European Council vote on whether to implement sanctions. This is of course a hefty process, cumbersome and bureaucratic, with no time limitations in place, meaning the process can continue indefinitely, perhaps even forgotten entirely. What's more, that section 7.2 needs the unanimous support of the European Council to reach a decision, makes any affirmative judgment nigh on impossible. Even more so when 2 member states are subject to the proceedings. Both Poland and Hungary can simply veto the decision on the other, halting any definitive ruling. The procedure then seems more symbolic than anything else. The case of Hungary outlines this futility. The Sargentini report, named after a Dutch Green MEP, attempted to outline the ways in which Hungary is in contravention of Article 2, with reference to the constitutional system, the independence of the judiciary, conflicts of interests, privacy and data protection, freedom of expression, academic freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of association, the right to equal treatment, the rights of minorities, the rights of migrants, and social rights. What's of interest here is the tensions within Orbán's parliamentary grouping, the European People's Party, the largest in the EU. Orbán has come under the thumb of his co-party members in the past, but has brushed them aside, likening the facade to a dance of the peacock, making inconsequential amendments in order to placate his critics. Indeed, it does seem odd that Orbán would find his home in a parliamentary grouping alongside the likes of Angela Merkel, but we'll get to that later. In the past, Orbán has counted on the support of the EPP, but it seems the goodwill of many has run dry. Martin Weber, the leader of the group, openly stated his intention to vote in support of the Sargentini report, in contrast to prior positions and likely influenced by his decision to run for European president. Even the formerly staunch Hungarian ally, the Austrian People's Party, fronted by Sebastian Kurz, voted in favour, much to the chagrin of Orbán. Orbán thus finds himself in the peculiar position of being a pariah in his own political grouping, but still a paradoxically important one. If Orbán's vision of an illiberal democracy is so reprehensible to the centrists of the EPP, why does he remain? They could boot him out and still maintain their status as the biggest group in Europe. Thing is, the situation isn't so clear-cut. Martin Weber has to present himself as a moderate due to his future presidential bid, but his party, the CSU of Bavaria, actually voted against the Sargentini report, as did the majority of the group's Spanish, Italian, Croatian, Slovenian and Bulgarian contingent. The EPP is thus the biggest group, but a strongly divided one between the southern and eastern countries on the one hand, and those of the north and west on the other. Kicking Fidesz out would only sediment these divides and scupper the ability of the EPP. Orbán has not pursued a conciliatory line. His speech to the European Parliament was unapologetic, and Orbán has made it plain that the changes the EU wish for Fidesz to make will not be undertaken. Indeed, there is little for Orbán to concern himself with. Fidesz distributed a 109-page rebuttal to the Sargentini report, and as far as they're concerned, the proceedings constitute little more than a witch hunt of liberal fundamentalists, to use the words of Judith Varga, Hungarian Minister of State for EU relations. Orbán seems content to pursue a wait-and-see approach, knowing full well that the powers of the EU are limited. Moreover, Hungary's robust position economically offsets the risk of any financial punishments that may take place, as was reported by German rating agency Scope. Instead, Orbán has pursued forging closer ties with those ideologically similar to him, like Salvini of Italy, Straka in Austria, or the PIS in Poland. Indeed, Orbán seems to be counting on a massive increase of populists in parliament following the 2019 EU parliamentary elections. This would effectively shift the balance and provide Orbán with a more favourable atmosphere, perhaps even to the extent that he could ditch the EPP and form a new parliamentary grouping altogether. The European Union was founded on the assumption that a unified Europe is a stronger and safer Europe. At present, it only seems to be highlighting the fractured landscape of European politics. With Romania next in the line of Article 7 recipients, it seems that things are hardly going to flatten out in the future. Problem is, with the EU's inability to enact any meaningful reforms on the so-called guilty nations, to what ends is all this being conducted? If Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary and Italy all become pariah states, then the EU has only managed to achieve one thing: a further divided Europe. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you liked the video, don't forget to click like, and please do click subscribe if you haven't already. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons. It's thanks to you guys that these videos are regular. As always, if you like what I do and it's within your means to do so, then please do consider becoming a patron yourself. Thanks a lot again for watching, and until next time.